Welcome to AI for You. Today's use case is about using AI to conduct an AI readiness assessment for your team or institution. Whether you're just getting started or trying to move past the piloting phase, it can be incredibly valuable to have a clear picture of where you are and what gaps you need to address to keep moving forward. The prompt in the show notes will walk you through how to set up an AI tool to act as a strategic consultant to assess your readiness across key dimensions like data infrastructure, governance, staff adoption, and budget. It will identify gaps, flag risks, and help you prioritize your next steps. Today, I have the pleasure of welcoming Dr. Manjeet Rege to the show. Dr. Rege is professor and chair of the Department of Software Engineering and Data Science and director of the Center of Applied Artificial Intelligence at the University of St. Thomas. He's a keynote speaker, a C suite advisor, and thought leader who has been recognized as a leading academic data leader by CDO Magazine, alongside his peers at Harvard, MIT, and Stanford. He speaks at institutions around the world about AI strategy, ethics, and governance. And he has a new book coming out this year entitled Ethics and Governance of Artificial Intelligence. Let's jump right in. Well, Dr. Rege, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you so much, Brian, for having me on the show.
So you've had a very interesting career, especially as far as AI is concerned. You moved from, mathematics to very more like clinical, traditional machine learning, and then really jumping into AI integration at a comprehensive level in higher ed. What was that moment when AI shifted from, an academic research to really like an institutional strategy, a priority for you?
For me, the shift happened many years ago when I was doing my PhD. One of the applications I was working on was that of a medical application for neurosurgeons. We were building a model that predicted which patients were at a high risk of a particular medical condition. I think it performed beautifully in validation, but the first week that we actually put it to go live, a physician's assistant, looked at the output and asked, if I act on this and if something goes wrong, who's responsible? And that question really got me thinking. It was the moment I realized that accuracy is only the beginning. Once a model touches a real workflow, you inherit questions about accountability, liability, trust, and even culture. Academic AI is about discovery, institutional AI is about consequences that you have to be aware of. And when a model changes a real decision for a person, you suddenly understand that AI is not a research project. It is an institutional strategy that requires governance, communication, and leadership. And that was the moment I stopped thinking like a researcher only and started thinking like a steward, rather.
Yeah, it is so much more than just a set of tools. It is really a set of decisions about how you're going to implement, how you're going to integrate, how you're going to use the tools, and what's responsible and what's not. And I think a lot of institutions miss that when they start down the AI adoption process and they say, well, let's just give everybody access to the tools. It's so much more than just access to the tools. So a lot of higher ed leaders are still looking at AI as just a tool, another element to add to the stack. Why is it so important strategically for institutions to really think about the responsible ways they're integrating these tools, the way they run these tool integrations as change management projects, not just as a new technology project?
Treating AI as a side tool is like treating water as optional. I mean, you can ignore it for a while, but eventually everything around you, depends on it. AI is now woven into how students learn, how faculty produce knowledge, how institutions operate. So students will choose institutions that prepare them for an AI shaped world. If you think about faculty, faculty will choose places to work where AI accelerates research and even reduces the administrative burden. Operations will remain, viable if AI is embedded into the workflow. So institutions that treat AI as an add-on, in the long term are going to fall behind. And the ones that really will survive are the ones that treat it as a strategic pillar. The competitive gap will, widen every semester. AI is no longer a convenience. It is a capability that is going to shape identity of institutions. It is going to help them stay relevant and also resilient with the changes happening. So if AI is on the side, your strategy is probably already behind. It shouldn't be on the side, it needs to be on your side.
Yeah, absolutely. I talk to so many organizations that are like, well, where should we start integrating this into our academics and into our courses? And I say, everywhere. It's going to be in every, I mean, not just in the teaching and the learning, but in the understanding and in the taking that practical knowledge that students learn and turning it into, useful ways to collaborate with these tools to get different insights. But so many organizations are still just like, well, we'll just add a new AI course or a new AI major.
Yeah,
It has
yeah.
to be in everything.
Right. So from the moment a prospective student takes a campus tour, they should feel that AI is all around them and not just in that one course, as you point out, but in terms of operational efficiencies of the institution as well.
You've spoken at institutions around the world. What are some of the big differences you see when it comes to AI adoption or access across the higher ed landscape at a global level?
Well, what I see globally is not a technology gap, it is a planning gap. Some institutions have moved from pilots to production. They have governance, roadmaps, and cross-functional teams. Others are still trying to experiment, still play, without really a long-term vision. In parts of Europe and Asia, I see a strong policy frameworks and national strategies that give institutions clarity and direction. In the United States, I see incredible innovation, but often, sometimes without coordination, which means progress kind of depends on individual champions rather than institutional commitment. In the global south, I see remarkable creativity with limited resources, but also a heavy dependence on external vendors because building in-house can be harder for those kind of institutions. So the real divide is not who has AI, it is who has a coherent story about why they are using it, how they will sustain it, and how it aligns with their own mission. AI strategy is the new equity, and planning is the new competitive advantage.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I was working with an institution recently that asked for a 5-year AI plan. And I said, well, no one can predict what's going to happen in 5 years, but having an AI plan, having a goal, having a roadmap, that is a true differentiator. And that can give you that clarity that you talked about.
Exactly. Exactly.
Now, you mentioned before that a lot of organizations are still in that piloting phase, and you have said in other interviews that the age of piloting is over, right? We really need to move into this operational AI. What does an operational AI department or organization really look like?
An operational AI looks like a core institutional function. It is not a lab where you come up with pilots anymore. It is not a committee of people who think about, how an AI pilot should be started. It is a delivery engine. It has product managers because at the end of the day, you're trying to build AI products. And those product managers who can think about translating institutional needs into AI solutions. Operational AI has data engineers who ensure the data is trustworthy and usable. Also, governance is extremely important. So having that part of your roadmap, because governance will ultimately help you manage risk, privacy, and also compliance. Operational AI has adoption specialists who, from a academic side, who train faculty and staff, redesign workflows. When I said operational intelligence, if there was something being done manually and probably in a much more inefficient manner, you can now redesign workflows so the tools actually get used. Because the last thing that you want is you bring in a new way of doing or maybe a new tool that does not get adopted heavily because people don't know how to use it or the workflows have not been redesigned. I would also say monitoring systems that track model performance. When we talk about model drift, that okay, something got implemented initially, but over a period of time, due to the user behavior change, it doesn't meet the requirements. And then slowly it can get thrown to the side. I would also give importance in operational AI to partnerships with academic affairs, enrollments, student services, and university advancement because you don't want AI to be only functional in one area, in a silo. When I say, the era of pilots is over because institutions can no longer afford experiments that do not scale. Pilots are cheap. They do not need much data. They do not need much compute. But scaling is when the rubber hits the road. They need AI that works on Monday morning, not just in a demo. So an operational AI department is, in my mind, measured by outcomes and not just the number of initial pilots or prototypes that you have built.
Yeah, I think that's so critical for organizations to think of when they're really trying to figure out how to prioritize AI, knowing that it's going to create these not only efficiencies, but innovations within the way that they do their work and the way that they function. But of course, that means that they're going to have to start looking at allocating budgets and resources and headcount to those efforts. And I think so many leaders who are trying to figure out the finances and the resources of it all don't understand the technology enough to even know what that looks like. As you work and talk with different organizations, what do you think like sustainable AI budgets look like? What sorts of things do they include?
That is something that is not thought about when you're piloting. Budgets are never thought about. But when you think about scaling up, budgets are an important aspect of it. And sustainable AI budget is not a line item. It is a portfolio. It includes platforms, data infrastructure, and even integration with your legacy systems. Also, people, right? So it includes people who can build, maintain, and importantly, govern. I would also say, including training for faculty and staff for adoption in real and not just symbolic. So that includes a certain amount of cost as well. Risk management, legal review. As I said earlier about model drift, so you could have continuous improvement. So if something worked, 6 months earlier, but now we see this change happening, we need to also invest. So we need to have some allocation and budget for continuous improvement of our AI as well. So it includes evaluation. So the institution knows what is working and what is not. It includes the time and resources needed to redesign workflows and not just deploy tools. Because if you just deploy tools and keep your old workflow, so if your old workflow was a broken workflow, well, now you just have an automated broken workflow. So it is important to work around AI and not just fit AI into an existing broken workflow. So if your AI budget is only a subscription fee, then you do not have an AI strategy. I would say that is a purchase order. Sustainable AI requires investment in capability, culture, and long-term value. So it is not about buying technology, it is about building capacity for long term.
Yeah, and I think it's so important. You talked about that shift in culture, right? You're investing in your culture. I think creating that culture of learning where people have the opportunity to experiment and explore and fail, as you do with AI when you're learning it. I think trying to figure out how to include that into your culture, the time that you're going to actually need to come up to speed, to get everybody on board, to start looking at changing your processes. That's not a clean transition from the way that we're used to making updates to our workflows. We're really reimagining the way that we can do our work in collaboration with these tools. So I think it's super critical to start integrating culture into those budgetary discussions as well. You had talked a couple of times, you mentioned a couple of times about building, and we see a lot of institutions and companies who are building internal solutions so that they can, have cleaner access to their data, integrating with existing tools that they already have. What advice do you have for organizations that are thinking about, building versus buying when it comes to AI solutions or some combination of the two?
So I think it depends on the use case. Institutions should buy what is a standard service and build what is your identity. Buy transcription, buy generic chat, buy the infrastructure that everyone needs. But build the workflows that, you know, reflect your mission, your advising philosophy for students, your admissions, logic, your student support model. That is something really core to the institution, core to the mission. The most successful institutions are doing both. And I think the secret sauce is recognizing which one is a better option. So they buy the foundation and build the last mile based on that. And that last mile is where the institutional identity lives. It is where the differentiation happens. It is where AI, becomes a strategic asset rather than just a generic tool. So the question is not build or buy. The question is what part of your value chain defines who you are. I think that is the part you build. The rest, the generic part, you can always buy.
Yeah, that's a great distinction on that. So we know that AI is going to take tasks away from us, right? A lot of times they're tasks that we don't want to be doing anyway, but they are going to change the functions, the job functions of people that we have within our teams, whether that means they're, learning how to manage agents or learning how to, build different GPT models to help them do their work. How do we think about retraining the teams that we have as opposed to replacing them with either someone that has knowledge around the AI space, but not necessarily the institutional knowledge or the knowledge for the domain?
Yeah. Retraining is extremely important, not only because then you have the buy-in from everyone, but also so that the employees are prepared and it leads to a higher tool usage. So you start by mapping tasks and not roles. AI automates tasks, not people, right? So once you understand the task landscape, you can then redesign the role. So humans move toward judgment, relationship, and exception handling. Then create short, targeted upskilling pathways that make people, AI fluent in their own discipline. You involve them in designing or rather redesigning the workflows so they see themselves as co-creators and not casualties of AI adoption. And when people feel ownership in that decision making, they automatically, lean in. When they feel threatened, they resist, right? So the goal is not or should never be to replace people. The goal should always be to elevate them. AI should make work, I would say, more human and not less human. So the institutions that win really will be the ones that treat AI as a workforce multiplier, not a workforce reducer or employee elimination tool.
Absolutely. We've talked a lot about the people, the human side. It keeps coming up as a theme on this podcast when I talk to people how AI can actually make us more human and find more opportunities for us to create connections. But we also want to look at the data because higher ed tends to have very fragmented data landscapes, very siloed sets of data across large institutions. And we know that AI comes in when you try to integrate it and it trains on the data that you have, right? And AI is not going to fix your data governance issues. You talk a lot about the difference between data stewardship and data ownership. What change happens when you make that shift culturally within an organization?
When you think about ownership, ownership creates silos. Stewardship creates responsibility. So when people think they own data, they protect it by restricting access. And that becomes a hurdle. So when they see themselves as stewards, they protect it by improving the quality of the data, documenting context, and enabling even appropriate usage of that data. Stewardship, shifts the culture from hoarding to collaboration. It turns data into an institutional asset rather than this is my territory and nobody should enter that. It also encourages transparency, accountability, shared purpose. It aligns, people around the idea that data is not a personal resource, but in fact, it's a public trust. And that, cultural shift is essential for AI to scale safely and ethically as well. So without stewardship, data becomes fragmented. AI, as a result, which depends on data, AI becomes fragmented. So with stewardship, AI has the potential to become a lot more transformative at a enterprise level.
When higher ed marketers, admissions people, advancement staff are thinking about how to integrate AI, what should they be thinking about from the human aspect of that, right? We've talked about this human in the loop role and how critical that is. Where do they make sure that they're, providing their expertise and information at the right stages with AI, especially as we move more towards, these agentic models that are doing complete workflows kind of.
We hear human in the loop quite a lot. I call it human AI, human loop, rather. So you have human before, you have human after AI. AI is in the middle. So what I mean by that is it's a very simple but I would say powerful idea. Humans set the intent. AI does the heavy lifting. And then eventually humans make the final judgment. Maybe, in admissions, AI can cluster applications, summarize patterns, and even discover insights. Humans still make the holistic decisions. In marketing, AI can generate variants, test ideas, analyze performance. Humans would still shape the voice and the strategy. If I think about fundraising, AI can identify prospects, maybe draft outreach, and even suggest the right timing. But it is ultimately humans that build the relationship with those prospects. So AI should accelerate the work, not replace the human connection that defines these fields. So the loop keeps the human at the beginning and the end, where meaning and accountability live. It is a workflow that respects both natural intelligence, not just artificial, right? So it's a workflow that respects human natural intelligence and human intuition.
Question I always finish off these interviews with is what specific AI use cases are most helpful to you professionally or personally?
Professionally, AI is my synthesis engine. It turns long reports into decision-ready briefs. It helps me try out different test strategies for my research by exploring, edge cases and, even ideate alternative scenarios. It accelerates curriculum design by generating some initial drafts. It drafts communications then that I can of course humanize and sharpen. It helps me think faster, I would say, and helps me see patterns sooner. So that is professionally. Personally, AI is my learning companion, my travel planner. It helps me explore new ideas quickly and plan experiences with a lot more precision. It gives me the gift of time by reducing, I would say, cognitive load, things that, I would rather be, thinking about larger issues. So in both uh, cases, whether it's professionally or personally, the pattern is the same. AI expands my capacity. As I said, human, AI, human. I, as a human, still make the decisions. It is not replacing my judgment. It is only amplifying it, actually.
I can't thank you enough for coming on the show, for sharing your insights with our audience. If they want to stay in touch with you, where is the best place for them to do that?
My website is manjeetrege.com. You can also look me up on the University of St. Thomas website.
And you have a new book coming out this year. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, we hear a lot about AI taking us over and some of the risks and challenges of AI. The name of this book is Ethics and Governance of Artificial Intelligence. I've had other books before which were a lot more technical and kind of meant for academic audience and researchers. But this is a book meant for everyone. So you don't need a prior technical background in AI. So it gives you a little bit about what is AI, and it then kind of makes us aware about the limitations of AI, and hopefully it gives you a positive outlook. Yes, it talks about some of the challenges and limitations and why governance of AI is important. But the reason I say it is meant for everyone because when you look at news reports and there's a lot of fear in people's mind, hopefully, we're able to address some of those fears and make everyone aware about positives and well as challenges of AI. I wouldn't call it negative.
Excellent. Well, can't wait for that to come out and looking forward to it. And thank you again for joining us on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me.
What an incredible conversation. Dr. Rege has such a clear and compelling way of framing the strategic dimensions of AI that every higher ed leader needs to hear. His point that we are past the age of AI pilots really hit home for me. Pilots are cheap and easy. Scaling is where the rubber meets the road, and that requires commitment. It requires project managers, data engineers, governance frameworks, adoption specialists, and real budget. His framing that if your AI budget is only a subscription fee, you don't have an AI strategy, you have a purchase order, that is something that every institution should write down on a whiteboard. I also loved his distinction between data ownership and data stewardship. Ownership creates silos, stewardship creates responsibility. That shift in mindset is what allows AI to scale safely and ethically. And it's something that every team across your institution needs to understand. His human AI, human loop framework is something I've been talking about and calling the human in the loop sandwich, right? Humans set the intent and provide the right data, the context, the expertise and experience. Then AI does the heavy lifting, the automating, the grunt work. And then humans come in on the back end to make the final judgment and take responsibility. That simple model applies beautifully to admissions, marketing, fundraising, and student services. And it keeps the human connection that defines our work at the center of everything we do. His advice on build versus buy is just spot on. Buy what is a standard service and build what is your identity. That last mile is where your mission lives. And that is the part that you need to own. This conversation was a masterclass in what it looks like to treat AI not as a tool that you add to the stack, but as a strategic pillar, as a partner that shapes your institution's identity and long term resilience. And I can't wait to read his new book. Please reach out to me with unique ways that you're integrating AI into your professional and personal lives. And as always, blue skies and keep creating.